Hi again then guys, and welcome to another breakdown, of course, of an individual car from the roster within Gran Turismo Sport, and this one is a little bit different to a lot of the cars that we would talk about usually because you can't buy it, and you can't get it in the mileage exchange either. This is one of the very few cars that you can only win. So technically speaking, because of course we've talked a lot about having secret cars and how many games don't do that anymore and how it's kind of a shame, it gives you something to work towards, so to some degree you could kind of say that Gran Turismo still has that with one or two vehicles, but it's slowly going away, and you can highlight that fact by saying that the other vehicle, which was like this before, the 125cc racing go-kart, can now be purchased. Of course, since the last update, they added it for like 10 grand to the dealership, so it's no longer a win-only vehicle. Although it wasn't exactly difficult to win anyway, you just had to watch the racing etiquette video. With this car though, it's a little bit different, and it actually requires a bit more effort as well, because to win this car you actually have to complete with all golds achieved the driving lessons, I believe it is, in the campaign mode, and they'll give you this car basically for getting all gold. That's an interesting way of doing it. It's kind of reminiscent to the cars that you'd win for licenses in previous games. I would personally say that still the best car from any license victory in all of the games of the franchise was in Gran Turismo 4, where if you got all golds in the special license, you of course got the Ford Model T. That was an amazing victory, an amazing car to win, and it made it worthwhile for sure. Of course, if you're a vintage enthusiast and a collector at least, this one is, in a funny kind of way, similar. It's not as difficult to win, and the car itself isn't quite as collectible or, ironically, quite as usable, but still it is a car that you can only win. Now, it is kind of surprising that you cannot buy this one, especially given that some of the other pace cars, of course, can be, such as the BMW, for about 4,000 or so mileage points. So why is this one win only when the other ones aren't? Is there something different about this one? Well, compared to a normal GT-R, there actually are a couple of differences. Of course, an obvious one is the lights, for instance, but a significant one is actually the weight. This weighs 30 kilos less than the normal GT-R equivalent in the game. That's an interesting change, not necessarily a huge one, but a change nonetheless. In terms of its engine, well, just like the normal one, we're not told how big the engine actually is. You can presume, of course, based on real-world specs. Of course, it's turbo-aspirated, still retains all-wheel drive. The power and the torque are exactly the same, which is 564 horsepower, 467 pound-feet of torque, and of course, because the weight is so high, the horsepower per tonne could be better, really, and of course you can make it better. You can increase the power, you can especially drop the weight, but standard you're looking at 324 horsepower per tonne. So what about in practice? How does it compare? And also, is it actually useful? Because if you're going to put the effort in, arguably, to win a car, you'd want to know to some degree that it's good for something. Well, yes and no. The pace cars, let's be honest, have always been a collector's piece. You could use them to race with, but that wasn't really why many of us liked it. We just were interested because it was different and cool. And it was also different in a time when we didn't have as many cars like that in the franchise. That was kind of a new idea, to have this pace car in the game. Then, of course, in more recent games, because initially, again, you had to win them, and there was the even more rare version with slightly more power, which didn't have the lights on top, which was pretty cool. In Gran Turismo 6, though, there were two, both of those, with and without the lights on the roof, with different amounts of power. They end up being pretty similar anyway when you tune them, but of course you could buy them now, just like you could with all of the cars in the game. So, from one point of view, that was cool. From another, well, you know my thoughts on prize cars and how good they are, but that is the case. This one's a bit different, because unfortunately, you can't use this one to race anything but itself, because, yes, it's in Group X. Of course it is. I mean, what else would the car be in? Although, arguably, you could justifiably put it in the same category as the road car. It's similar enough, for sure. Although it's, yeah, a little bit lighter. It doesn't really matter. It's not like it's that much faster anyway, so having this as a street car would at least make more people use it, and it would be a special occasion to see a car like this in an online lobby. Unfortunately, though, the fact that it is Group X means that you can only race it against itself, which is a disappointment, or at least against, you know, Group X kind of vehicles, depending on the lobby, the rules, etc. So again, from a certain point of view, it's like the Ford Model T, it's like the Pace Car itself used to be, and again, to allude back to Gran Turismo 4, there were certain cars in that game in particular which you could not race. The Caterham, for instance, you could not take that in any form of race. The Audi Streamliner, the Auto Union V16, you could not race that car. In fact, if I recall correctly, I think you could only take it on 2 tracks, the Nürburgring and the test course, if I recall correctly. Now, more recently, you can drive them anywhere you want. Now, this car kind of occupies the position that they were in. For me personally, it's not really special enough of a car to justify having that kind of treatment. The Auto Union is very cool, the Model T is very cool and unique, and even the Pace Car and stuff like the Caterham, they had a bit of flair to it. This one though, I don't know, for me it just doesn't really do it. It's essentially a GT-R with lights on top. So if that does it for you, then sure. We've also got, of course, the AMG GT Pace Car, we've got the BMW Pace Car. So again, it just doesn't feel as special anymore. It's not even the only one of its kind in the game, and the other ones are arguably easier to get because you can just buy them. So for those with less skill, perhaps, who can't get all gold on those events, you might want to save the cash, or not necessarily the cash actually, but save your time and try to get the Beamer instead, or the AMG, if you're purely looking for like a cops and robbers car for sure. This one is more for the super fan. If you're a fan of the GT-R, if you love cars that pay homage to the past of the franchise, which this definitely does that, then of course, check it out. Otherwise, it's a gimmick. Of course it is. The whole point of the car is that, and this is the absolute pinnacle of it being a gimmick because it's been useful far more than this in previous games. So, unfortunately, I wish I could say that you could use it more, but that's just the way it is. In terms of performance, in terms of track use, like I said, it's close enough to the regular GT-R to not really blow your mind. It's just as good. So ultimately, if you want to put in the time, it's not overly difficult to get. It's just a pure collector's piece, a pure piece of fun, basically. So it's cool from that point of view. It's a car that isn't just for racing. That's a good argument to make, it's true. But at the same time, you might be a little disappointed by it once you've got it and just end up collecting dust pretty much in the garage. But overall, that's it for this pick. Of course, I will see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.